Patch 13.15 is upon us with some nerfs, some buffs, and some other changes too. Starting with nerfs, we have Aatrox, whose AD scaling on his Q is being slightly reduced. Next, we have the much needed nerf for Ivern, who is losing 2 flat magic resist and some scaling magic resist too. However, his ally on hit damage from his W passive is being increased by a flat 5 at all ranks, and his shield is having its flat strength increased but is losing a large amount of AP scaling. And finally, Daisy will now only last for 45 seconds, and her health and armor will be higher early game, but lower in the late game, and her attack is losing a large amount of AP scaling. Following this, we have Kai'Sa, who is losing 30 base health. In addition, her Q will now scale less well with AP, and her evolved W's cooldown after hit is increased. Next, we have Maokai, whose Q damage to monster is being toned down slightly. Following this, we have Sejuani, whose W is losing 10 flat damage from both the first and second cast of the ability. And the final nerf goes to Shyvana, who is losing a small amount of AD growth and health growth per level. As for buffs, the first one goes to Caitlyn, whose passive and ultimate will now scale better with her critical strike chance. Next, we have Camille, who is getting a 0.3 increase to her AD scaling, and her ultimate's bonus magic damage per attack is being massively increased, which should be a really substantial buff to her. Following this, we have Gwen, who is gaining 0.5 more health regen per 5, and the bonus armor and magic resist from her W is going up by a flat 5 at all ranks, making her far tankier. Next, we have Nami, whose passive bonus movement speed is going up to a flat 100, and it's also gaining 5% more AP scaling. In addition, the damage from landing her W is going up by a flat 15 at all levels. Following this, we have Talia, whose Q is gaining 5 additional flat damage at all levels, and her E will have a lower cooldown early game. In addition, her E will also deal increased damage to monsters to help with her jungle clear. And finally, we have 2 buffs which a lot of the League community has been dreading for a long time. Firstly, we have Yasuo, whose passive will now protect him far more in the mid game. This is an interesting change as the shield value at level 1 and 18 has remained the same, but it means when he starts power spiking, that shield is going to be incredibly valuable for him. And in addition, we have Yone, who is also getting a tankiness buff, where his W will now grant him a larger shield at all points in the game. So if you thought Yone won trades before, just wait until he negates even more damage. We also have some champion adjustments, starting with Annie and her Tibbers. Tibbers is losing some flat health early, but gaining more flat health later. However, the AP scaling of their health and the armor and magic resist is being largely decreased, which should make Tibbers far easier to deal with. We also have a similar thing with Donga, where his ultimate turret will now have less flat health, and the health will not scale quite so hard with AP. However, with Donga, the turret is also getting additional resistances. Following this, we have Yorick, whose maiden will now gain health regen and additional armor and magic resist. In addition, the maiden's health early is actually being increased. However, the price to pay for all of these changes is that later in the game, her health is going to be massively decreased, as well as not scaling quite so well. We also have a few adjustments for Rel. Firstly, with her passive, all spells and auto attacks will now damage first and then apply her passive, where before it seemed like it's a little bit all over the place with what was applied first. In addition, her Q will now keep the same direction after flashing, which should be far more intuitive, and her W is having a small change where she gets increased dash speed just before the flip once she's locked onto the target. Following this, we have a change to Smite where it won't deal as much damage to summons monsters like Tibbers, and the slow will only be granted when it's fully upgraded. We also have a small change for Night Harvester where Soul Rend is only applied when you deal damage to an enemy with an attack, ability or pet, and the slow from Glacial is being heavily nerfed.